Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of All Things Ilyast. This is your boy. He's back with his shawl. It's a bit cold down here at the moment, and I've got the heating off because the vent is right over where the microphone is. And in access to my breathing in the mic, you'll also hear the sort of vent blowing out the hot air. So I've switched that off and I've warmed myself up for this to continue. I'll start off the episode with a short poem by a Palestinian poet named Najwan Darwish. The title of the poem is called The Shelling Ended. And it goes, "No one will know you tomorrow. The shelling ended, only to start again within you. The buildings fell, the horizon burned, only for flames to rage inside you, flames that will devour even stone. The murdered are sunk in sleep, but sleep will never find you. Awake forever, awake until they crumble, these massive rocks, said to be the tears of retired gods. Forgiveness has ended, and mercy is bleeding outside of time. No one knows you now, and no one will know you tomorrow. You, like the trees, were planted in place while the shells were falling." And with that, we'll move on to a short section on current news, a headline that caught my attention for various reasons, and I'll read that. So this is on ABC. So the headline is Stephen Pokyrwka, if I'm saying it right, deported to United Kingdom after federal court appeal fails. And if we scroll down, it says, a migrant grandfather who spent decades building a life in Australia has been deported to the United Kingdom because of his criminal drug conviction after a last-minute appeal against his visa cancellation was rejected. Stephen, and his last name that I can't pronounce, was sentenced in 2019 to 6 years in jail for attempting to supply meth. It is the only time the 55-year-old has spent behind bars, and the parole board recommended he be released back into the community in February. But under the country's migration legislation, anyone without Australian citizenship status risks having their visa cancelled if they are convicted of a crime that carries a sentence of 12 months or more. Scrolling down further, Mr. Pokyrwka was sent to Yonga Hill Detention Center and continued to fight against the deportation order he received early into his sentence. Just make sure I'm recording. Having lived in Australia since he was 12, the father of 6 and grandfather of 10 argued he had no ties to the UK and simply had not thought to apply for Australian citizenship. The article also gets into detail how his family is heartbroken and devastated by this news, and rightfully so. The point of reading this is to understand where we draw the line of human empathy in terms of migration or immigration and deportation, even if people have got criminal convictions against their names. Do we only show empathy for people who look like the idea of a mainstream Australian? Or can we extend this empathy into other cases in which there's other crimes, to whatever extent we can draw the boundaries and we can sort of apply the same amount of sympathy and empathy over there as well? Is every migrant who has lived the Aussie life, who's paid their taxes, paid their dues, and built a life here, should be afforded the sympathy and understanding that Mr. Pokyrwka has been afforded or has been extended. I don't know. And I think that's the question we sort of have to have a think about. I'll also touch base on Euros, where England has barely beaten Slovakia, which is beyond my understanding. How does a team with Bukayo Saka, Jude Bellingham, Phil Foden, and Harry Kane in their attack is 1-0 losing to Slovakia? And I don't even know any names of their players. I'm not sure where they play, who are these guys, but they were winning 1-0 until extra time. And that's when magic happened. It's just beyond my understanding that aside with this much like talent. And even if you go to the bench, they've got Conor Gallagher, they've got Ivan Toney, Cole Palmer, Luke Shaw, Anthony Gordon, Ollie Watkins. There's so many people. Maybe this is a sign of what they'll be able to sort of like. They've it's a test, and they will prevail and be able to win the final, and it will finally come home. But it is beyond my understanding. Tournament after tournament, with all the talent, all the hype, everything, they just can't do it. Turkey beat Austria, which is again, I'm happy about that. A slightly more diversity in the quarterfinals. I'm not sure if they'll make it through there, but again, they're there. They've also played really well, and they've reached the quarterfinals. One constant hammering down beating is of Belgium, with generational talents that have been on the team. They just haven't been able to get anything done. You be it Lukaku, be it Kevin De Bruyne, be it Eden Hazard, and whoever else they've got on their team. It's just been a constant letdown in terms of their performance at a world stage while representing their country. In the quarterfinals, we've got a cracker. We've got Spain versus Germany. I'm leaning towards Spain, but you never know. I do like Kai Havertz. He plays for my favorite team, Arsenal. So could he be the difference maker? That is a question. Portugal versus France. I favor France. Thank you, all the African migrants in the French team who are able to bring the glory and all the accolades to the French team. England versus Switzerland. I am leaning towards the Swiss. I would love for Granit Xhaka to have this victory as well. He's been on a run since he's left Arsenal. He's won the Bundesliga, won the Europa. They're here in the quarterfinals in the Euros. Life is good. And the last matchup is Netherlands versus Turkey, which again, I think I'll have to favor the Dutch, but again, I do root for Turkey to make it through. I just want to keep saying Turkey because that's now what their official name is. It's not Turkey, it's Turkey. I also want to talk about this masterpiece of a movie called Hangman that I watched on Amazon Prime. It is starring Al Pacino, Carl Urban from The Boys, oi oi, oi hiwi, and it's got Patricia Snow. She's been in some stuff as well. So Hangman starts off really well. Well, that's an. I take that back. Hangman starts off like a ripoff of every thriller that you could have seen, namely Seven and The Dark Knight. There's a mysterious killer amidst other men, the common population, that has a thing for hanging people. So he targets them. And then he carves Latin on their bodies, an alphabet, and then he hangs them by the neck. And he's very good at it. Al Pacino is a retired detective who's friends with Carl Urban, who's probably half his age, but that's not important. Sometimes the friendships, they just blossom, even if there's a huge age gap. And they come across this guy to eventually later find out that Carl Urban's wife in the movie was killed in a similar manner, which they didn't register until like halfway through. And then Joe Anderson, who's playing the antagonist, he comes in and there's a reveal of who he is, and then he kidnaps the reporter who is helping the two detectives on the case, and they have this conversation in a weird Heath Ledger's Joker style while he's holding a camera and he's filming her, and then he talks about these scars that he has, and I lost it. But anyways, and then Al Pacino comes and he's like, ooh, 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 ooh. And then they have this conversation about Joe Anderson's father, who was a drug addict, was being evicted, and he hung himself when he was a young boy, was in the house. An eviction that was red in color on a piece of paper. They zoom into it on the floor. And he's writing eviction in Latin on the bodies that they keep finding. And Al Pacino's like, hey, I was the officer on the case. I shouldn't have left you. Please forgive me. Ooh, take me, take me. And then, but he's not budging. And then he runs off. And then he is chased by Butcher, Carl Urban. And then they get into a fight. And then they they toss him over the stairs and he falls over, hitting his head. And then they shoot him. And then he dies. And the movie's ending. It's disappointing. It's infuriating. And that's fine. And then I think Al Pacino dies. Something happens. And while Carl Urban is in the graveyard, in the cemetery, a girl hands him a note with another Hangman reference in it. So they were hoping for part two. What I want to know about this movie is that there were people who came together with the concept, and there was a script. And then they went, here's the thing, we'll just go with Al Pacino, because he's a great actor. And then we'll also go with Carl Urban. And the cast is amazing, it's massive. So we'll make this masterpiece. Let's put in a line about scars, like this is a ripoff of The Dark Knight. And also, let's just make it in a way that it seems a bit like the movie Seven. And then the light bulb went off, and they said, this is going to be so good, such a good movie, that we could have a franchise of it. And I think then, and no. And then they went ahead. And then they shot it, they edited it, they watched it. They edited it, watched it, and went, this is the product that I want out with these two great actors. And this is what we have. This is an amazing movie. I just want a 5-year ban on actors, on the crew, the writers, the director, people who engage in a horse shit project like this. I just want them to be sort of like blacklisted for like 5 years so they can't find work. So they can sort of have a think about their choices. And speaking of Al Pacino, I think the shtick has gotten old. And I understand he's probably like 185. Like he's, well, not 100, but he's at least 85. And he's got some work done on his face, and that's okay. And the eyes are like almost like closing because of the age. It's like the eyelids have sort of like outgrown, and they're just lower on his face. But the expressions are not almost there because, again, he probably has got some work done. And the same, like, it gets old, man. Do something else. And now I'll flip it to a great movie that we watched. It's called Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. The Covenant is a tale about a local interpreter who risks his own life to carry his injured sergeant to safety from the enemy territory, which is controlled by the Taliban. The Covenant is a very well acted movie. The music, the dialogue, the the acting, the atmosphere, even though it was shot in Spain, they still were able to like capture what would the landscape possibly would be in Afghanistan in those times. Um, Jake Gyllenhaal is tremendous in this role. So is Dar Salim, who plays the interpreter called Ahmed. The movie beautifully explores like the pact, the like and the kingship, the understanding that sort of have the two men have with each other. Because then once Master Sergeant John Kinley is rescued by his interpreter Ahmed. He moves to safety. He goes back to the US, in which he has dreams and nightmares about the arduous journey that he went through. And he's in and out of consciousness because he's badly hurt and injured. And then he comes back to save Ahmed because he's got a bounty on his head for helping John Kinley escape. If you ignore the heroism that's sort of attached to every American invasion, if you can just ignore that, if you can also ignore the plight of the local Afghans by this war and the invasion, I think this movie is really enjoyable in terms of the shots, the action sequences, the music. Oh, the music! I loved it. It was like for every shot. I'm not sure who the musician is, but I've got some of the songs on my playlist at the gym, and it just really sort of it's very slow and sad, but it sort of gets my juices flowing. That's a weird sentence to say. We've also got our boy Homelander in that as well. At the very end, he plays Eddie Parker, the contractor who then helps extract John Kinley and Ahmed from Darunta Dam, if I can remember that correctly. So give that a watch. It's a very good movie. It's on Amazon. It's for free, so you can. I mean, it's not really for free, but it's a part of your Amazon subscription. If you can watch it and let me know what you think. Lastly, I can't escape my interest and what I feel towards the horror stories and jinn stories. I read them in my free time sometimes. I religiously watch Nuke's Top 5, even though half the videos are absolute, but I watch it. I've been watching it for the past 6 years, maybe 7 years, and I'll keep doing it. And he only posts now every 4 weeks, and that's okay. I'm happy to wait. So, I have gone to Reddit to read through some of the jinn stories shared by the people, the beautiful people of Pakistan, and I will read them out. I'll sort of add on some flavor to them, and I'll hope that you enjoy it. All right, so this guy goes, I know you guys have heard of people called Allah Wale, or maybe that's what my family calls them. And then he goes on to explain who they are. But basically, they are the people who can somewhat communicate with jinns. That means they have special powers. So I have this relative who've had this specific room in her house always shut. There's always these goddamn rooms in these old houses that are creepy AF, like completely locked. She'd only enter the room once a week, I guess, to clean it out, but other than that, never. Khair, that means anyhow. It's a very Pakistani thing to say, khair. She had inherited the house, and her father was the main person who was what you could say gifted. That means he had the ability to communicate with jinns. Very religious, very educated, and well known. The type of educated and well known whose funeral was attended by major force generals and governors. Ooh. And then goes, and well, he had passed down his gift to his daughter. Khair, another khair. We dipped out about the dad and we're just heading back into the story. We dipped out and then we're just going back in. I was saying this, khair, anyhow, let's just go back to what we were having a chat about. Back to the story. The reason that room would always be locked was because there were literal jinns residing there, and they never allowed entry of anyone besides her. By her, he means the lady, the daughter, who inherited the house from her father, who was very educated and was friends with generals and governors. And that too happened after lots of communication took place because of incessant teasing on their part. There, in this context, means the jinns, such as cutting off hair and randomly, sorry, such as cutting off hair randomly when she'd walk by the room, or hiding her stuff, or shaking her bed. Here's my question though. If the door is locked and and she's not inside and they can still cut her hair and shake her bed, then what is the point of having the door locked? Because obviously whatever that lock is not working. Anyways, back to the story. Once my brother, my mom, and I went to visit her, since my mom is very close to that woman. And they were talking about some stuff, so we went to her room. By the way, she was single. She was a single woman, so she lived alone. And my brother decided to lie down on her bed and sleep. These kids, man, they got no boundaries. There's always a baby, there's always a brown baby asleep in some room at a party or whenever you go somewhere. There's always some brown kid just having a nap on your bed just because, that they're exhausted and tired of socializing. I was checking out her bookshelf, and we were really young, like 8 to 12 years old, as far as I remember. So old enough to not just have a sleep at someone's bed, but they still did it. All of a sudden, the bed starts shaking, the type of shaking that would occur in an earthquake, and I immediately ran out of the room, leaving my brother there. My God, Ya Allah. I remember him being so scared, ready to poop his pants. Khair. However, the lady told us that was a quite common occurrence and not to worry about it, but Allah knows, God knows, my brother has since then never ever stepped in that house again. Apart from that, there were small incidents in my own house, but that really doesn't faze us anymore. May Allah keep us safe from all evil and bad jinns, spirits. Ameen. Ameen, brother. And there's another gem here. Once my sister and I were fighting like 6 a.m. in the morning of winters. So the sun hadn't come up yet, and it was before Fajr time, which is the first prayer before sunrise in the day. We got a little loud, and then mom separated us to different rooms. Rowdy girls. That sounded weird. I was in the drawing room, and my sister was in the TV lounge. Suddenly, the main door to the house started rattling like someone with heavy muscles was knocking on it. I thought my sister was throwing another temper tantrum with the doors, and she thought it was me. Now, this is confusion. I am confusion here. Someone is banging on the door, the gate of the house, I'm assuming that's what that means. And one sister thinks it's the other sister, and the other sister thinks it's the first sister. Anyways, it stops, and my mom comes in and says, someone is banging on the door outside. Come inside for safety. And I was like, wasn't it sis? And she's like, I thought it was you. So they both think that one of them was doing this. Anyways, we are so spooked, we forgot our fight, and we started reciting Ayatul Kursi. Now, this is a surah from the Quran, which you generally which you recite if you are scared for safety. So, and it sort of rids of evil entities. The knocking was so loud that even the neighbors were talking about it. Their mom was like, "What was that sound?" And their kid said that these girls next door were fighting because I heard them. Embarrassing. Haha. And then just that's how they ended. So for you kids, if you keep acting out and arguing, it may not be your mom, but someone is going to shut it down. and I've just hit my hand at the bone on the table, and that's fine. The last one is my dad saw a churail. Churail. My dad saw a churail or a jinn dressed as a churail when he was a child. A churail is more like a female jinn entity. He was traveling in the village late at night with his dad on a bicycle, and my dad sees a bride dressed in red sitting next to the road, and my dad says to his dad, "Dad, look, a bride." And his father tells him to look away. Then they cross several fields, and my dad sees the same exact bride sitting on the road again, and this time laughing. And then his father looks at her feet, and they are reverse, like in reverse. And then he speeds up and reads Ayatul Kursi, again, a surah from the Quran, which you should recite if you come across these evil entities, and tells my dad to look away. When they reach home, my dad had a severe fever, which lasted for a few days. There is always a bride dressed in red. At first, she's always quiet, and then she's laughing, and then she's running, and then she's on top of you, and then you're married, then you have kids, and you live a happy life. Maybe she's just out there to find love. Have you ever considered that? Maybe she's dressed up. She like all this effort, you know. She put on a good dress, some makeup. Those feet gotta hurt because I'm sure if you had your feet sort of like reversed, it would hurt. But she's out there. She's out there to find love, and all she gets is rejection, and that's sad. And if I see something in red at night, I will immediately faint. That's it. Which is again very funny because there is an when we were growing up, there was an understanding among the older generations of people that if a man sees a bride or he hears a female voice from the dark calling him towards her, all he has to do is just take off his pants. And I wonder how many times someone was actually there, like a lady, and then the guy was just so scared with his pants off and just taking off. You know? I'll do another one. I'll do another one, the last one. This is just, I can't stop myself. There is a friend of mine who lives near me. He was very intelligent student. He was a very intelligent student. He got 1,040 plus marks in the matriculation, which is their sort of high school. Then he started memorizing the Quran. Impressive. Once he told his friends that he would go to the graveyard with perfume during Maghrib. Maghrib is when it's the prayer of sunset. It gets darker. And they also say that this is a time when the veils between the worlds are a bit thin. So don't be doing crazy stuff in this time. Some people even shut the doors and the windows to sort of stop any free mixing among the two worlds because you don't want them sort of around. Back to the story. After this, he started to behave strangely. His brother told me that he would often start beating him suddenly without any reason. That's called being a brother. That's called testosterone. My brother used to whoop my ass all the time. Then he was brought out to some amils, which is sort of the reverse of a wizard, like a good wizard. People with knowledge and who practice like faith enough that they can sort of make some readings and sort of like chase away any of sort of evil entities that could be attached to you. Not a priest though. That told him that Achrael is in love with him. So again, I told you sometimes they're just out there to find love. It's funny that he does whenever he's bored. He's like, I'm just gonna beat up my brother. That's all good. And after some durood, some readings and recitations, he came back to college. He was on a scholarship for FSC, which is their intermediate. But again, he fell ill and now he has quit his education completely. His studies, he left it. He now runs his father's grocery shop. He's happy now. I often meet him. Now he's normal. And there are probably 1,700, 4,700,000 stories like this in Pakistan, in which there's a kid who's seemingly nice and obedient. He goes to school, he does well academically, and someday he just changes. There's no consideration of any mental health, obviously, because why would we do that? Because it's easier to understand the paranormal than to diagnose someone's mental health and see where they're at. And as far as the beating his brother is concerned, welcome to the life, man. Every younger brother has been through it. That's how I became tough. The first time that I realized that I could match my brother's strength was amazing. Because he was always older, so he's got 6 to 7 years on me. He was an athlete in his school. He could run really fast. He still can. I can't. But strength wise, the first time he tried to slap me around, and I just was like, not anymore. There's going to be a balance in this unbalanced equation. I will even this out. And I still remember the look of shock on his face because my sister got married and she came to visit, and we like dropped, we walked her and her husband back to their car, and the power went out. So I'm walking on the street towards the house, and he just smacks me in the back of my neck, and I've got a flat head, and I don't like it. So it just goes, and I'm like 15, and I'm just like 16 maybe, and I'm gonna just like amped up. Well, maybe not. I think I'm 14. And then we come in, and then I sort of like grab his arm and I push him away, and then he smacks me again, and then I just like grab him. I would never hit him back. I would just hold him and move him around to tell him that I could do it if I wanted to. And then he gets in my face and he slaps me again, and I just, with every ounce of force in my body, I pushed him back. I pushed him towards some boxes on the floor, and he trips over them. And I remember the look of shock on his face, like, is this happening to me? Yes, sir, it is. And once I did that, I realized what was going to happen to me. So I covered up my face and I just went down to the ground. And then he just came and he kicked and he punched, but I was blocking everything. Then he got tired, and then he said, and he realized what he had done. Obviously, I wasn't hurt or bleeding. I was just sort of in my shell, in the Philly shell, not really going on the attack, just absorbing strikes. I was Mickey Ward, and he was the other boxer who passed away. I can't remember his name at the moment. I can't remember his name at the moment. But then he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, like it's just I lost control." And yeah, since then we sort of, there was understanding in the house that the power imbalance was there no more. So I think I've gone a little longer than I initially wanted to, because I just get sort of so sucked in to this experience of sharing stories and reading stuff. But I'll leave you with another gem for you to think about. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but whips and chains, I'm not going to say that. Thank you for watching. Be safe, be good. Keep being humble. Practice humility. Share your kindness. Be understanding, and open your eyes to differing opinions, and be just a bit more aware of what's happening around you and in the world, and whatever you can do to sort of improve it in your own way. Rather, it could just be something as small as an act of kindness and understanding, or self-reflection, which is important. See you in the next one. Thank you.